next. Let's speak with Zachary Marsh, Research Fellow in Education at the Policy Exchange. I mean, I guess, I don't know where to start with this, Zachary. I'm so confused. I feel as if I've had my entire history rewritten at the moment. But broadly speaking, I suppose we've all been different races throughout our time since we began has, looked different, brown, black, white, whatever it happens to be. So I'm sure 7,000, for 7,000 years, there were people that didn't just look white. But the point of all of this is that there seems to be more than a little revisionism going on. Would that be fair?
Absolutely. And I think what our report showed was that in too many cases, we're having examples of students, often at quite a young age. We look in particular at Key Stage 3 for a lot of our report, being exposed to narratives that lie far outside of the mainstream of historical opinion, but are not then getting the counterpoint of what perhaps we would consider to be a more accurate depiction of the past. So you cite some of the examples there around, for example, black people supposedly building Stonehenge, which is a very fringe perspective, which is not agreed with by the vast majority of historians, but is nonetheless being promoted in a very schools-friendly resource, which ranks among some of the top listed resources in this area. So there's definitely an issue of one-sided narratives being put across in schools, often by teachers who are very rapidly throwing lessons together because they don't have the time, they don't have access to high-quality resources, and therefore are kind of being tricked into using these outwardly very polished-looking resources that nonetheless put across a very politicised view of the past.
Where does this come from, and how does it make its way into sort of education? I mean, that's there's nothing wrong with a fringe view. It's a free world. People are, as long as they can corroborate their facts. In fact, even if they can't, let them be written off if they can't. But how does this stuff get legitimised almost?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we've picked up on in this report that we've done with Policy Exchange is basically that large numbers, particularly since we sort of saw Black Lives Matter protests of 2020, of organisations have been producing school-friendly resources that essentially include their view of the past. And we, as I said before, a lot of teachers in this country are time poor. They don't have very long to put their lessons together. And these oven-ready resources are therefore very attractive for them to pick up and put into their lessons. The problem is that, as I say, they look very nice at the start, but often they convey these very one-sided perspectives. And one of the things we call for in our report is for teachers to not only have more training so that they can identify high-quality resources and they have the historical know-how to understand what they should be getting across, but also for schools to invest and be given the money to invest in better quality resources, things like textbooks that are likely to ensure that students get a proper version of history rather than activism in the guise of high-quality resources. Yeah,
and you can read, there's all sorts of books on all manner of themes where somebody has a different version of events to something, and that's fine. But if you're getting it into education and telling kids, one would assume that this is fact, then you're in a bit of iffy territory there, and guilty by omission as well if you are building a syllabus that deliberately omits, some fairly chunky and provable aspects of our history, but including stuff that's open to, to be generous, a bit of debate.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we want to see is students taught, in areas that are contested, for example, the legacy of the British Empire, students being exposed to both sides of the argument.
100%.
Making sure that people are hearing both things and often being asked to make up their own mind and begin that process of historical inquiry, which is a really important part of history teaching in schools. But as we found in the report, too often that isn't happening. We're getting one side of the story and not the other. And we are calling for a much more balanced view of history to be taught in schools, which is happening in a lot of places, but sadly not often enough across the board.
Indeed. Zachary, thank you for your time, sir. Appreciate that. Zachary Marsh, Research Fellow in Education.